Hey guys, welcome to the Amendment Lab. This is our first episode, and we have a special guest today, Louis. Jordan, how you doing?
Doing great. So excited for our first episode. Can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, we've been trying to get this happening. We were trying to get this about a month or two ago, but life happens, and here we are finally. And yeah, this is fun. Jordan and I have been we're leaders on the California Convention of States team, and this kind of spawned out of Convention of States. And I don't know, Jordan, you want to mention Convention of States? What do you do?
Yeah, for convention states, I'm mostly working with universities. I will give presentations to universities around the state and share with them about constitutional reform. It's been really successful. I think if we're ever going to do anything uh, on the constitutional level, I think we have to have the universities. So that's really where my passion lies. And there's some really brilliant students here in California. So I've really enjoyed doing that. But Convention of States has a few things that are that we're interested in reforming, and one of those is fiscal restraints on Congress. And we were talking about it before the show that just so happens that today we ticked 40 trillion, and here we have Louis here to talk about it.
That's insane, right? Today, 40 trillion. Louis, what's up, buddy?
Hey Josh, hi Jordan. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be the first guest of the show. And yeah, I'm here today to talk about the national debt, $40 trillion of federal government debt. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Southern California, Orange County area. Went to Troy High School and went to UC Berkeley for undergraduate and studied environmental economics and policy. After that, I also was a competitive swimmer throughout my youth, and I swam at UC Berkeley. Went to Olympic trials in 2004, 2008. Had the honor of racing and getting beaten by Michael Phelps a number of times. And in after my undergraduate, I spent 2 years in Kenya doing the Peace Corps. And went to my graduate school at University of Michigan, getting applied economics master's degree and environmental policy master's. So currently I teach. Yeah, sorry, but I currently
No,
teach at Mount San Antonio College as an economics professor.
right. Important question. How many times did you race Michael Phelps?
I think it was 4, and he won every time. But
That's that.
he was going easy in the morning. Prelims doesn't matter, and I'm going as hard as I can so I can make
Jeez.
8. And then he's cruising, and then at night he breaks the world record and just smokes everyone.
Oh my gosh. So you were there when he broke a world record.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
It's like almost every time he swims a big meet, he's breaking world records. He was incredible. So yeah.
Michael Phelps is like the federal government, right? Just constantly breaking these records. He's like the 40 trillion swimmer, right?
Right.
Yeah. I see what you did there.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, what are we talking about today? You said some deficits, and let's get into this.
So let me share my screen right here.
Go for
Let's share my entire screen. I just wanted to bring up. Oh, you can see it right here. Awesome. This is the usdebtclock.org. It's a fun website. I like to
Yeah.
students. It gives us kind of a rough, accurate total of the current national debt, and you can see it ticking up. It's gone up by $100,000 in the last couple seconds, and we can divide that by the number of citizens and the number of taxpayers in the United States. And so if we wanted to pay off our debt, maybe every citizen can pay about $116,000, and we'd be almost debt free. So that gives a sense of the debt burden onto society. And hopefully during this time we'll talk a bit about what the implications are of this debt burden. And I think that's the scariest part, the most important part. And
I felt like I was like watching. It's like The Matrix. Remember those scenes in The Matrix? All those numbers going.
right. And yeah, I love I love this website because it has just a bunch of different information, like money growth since 1913. The money supply has grown, according to this, about 1,417 times, right? In about a century and, a decade, right? And, wage growth has gone up as well. But there's definitely a connection between the amount of money in the US economy and the amount of debt that the federal government is taking on.
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother podcast topic, but just, how
And so that money growth, incorporates all the different types of money supply. Is that right?
this would probably so I would have to look into what they specifically are looking at, but this usually just includes M2, which is
Okay.
a narrower
Yeah.
definition of money in the money supply. M2 is like the standard for measuring the money supply. It's what the Federal Reserve likes to use most, and M2 is just basically like your currency, money in your savings account, checking account, and money in that is fairly liquid, and like money market mutual funds, stuff like that, and like just stuff that you can easily get access to and use to pay for groceries or things like that, right? Money in the stock market is not considered that because you can't go to the grocery store and give them a share of Apple stock and then get groceries. So it's a little bit less liquid. So M2 tries to
Hmm.
measure that. So, but yeah, this money supply growth is an interesting question, maybe for another episode. But
Mhm.
interested in just the national debt, it recently hit $40 trillion literally today.
Horrible.
Right. And I just wanted to show the trajectory from 1925 to 2025. So this is not updated to um, current day. We know our national debt's at 40 trillion. So this goes up to 37.6 trillion. That's in 2025.
Okay.
And you can see just how quickly the national debt has grown, especially since 2001. The total debt was about $10 trillion. And from 2001 to 2010, it doubled from 10 trillion to 20 trillion. And 16 more years later, it's at 40 trillion. So another doubling. This is a very rapid increase of debt. And the challenge right now is that there seems to be no slowing of this national debt burden. Every year it just seems to be increasing. And it's honestly a bit scary because right. It's almost like the Titanic heading toward the iceberg, right? There's a lot of things we can do now to avoid that, but it doesn't seem like an urgent problem, so we don't want to deal with it. And that, yeah. So we hope we,
Can I ask a question about that?
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Because we say, the debt increases and that becomes a problem. Just by looking at the graph, we should just be in hyperinflation right now. And the dollar seems to be doing okay. Maybe not in the greatest position, but what determines whether we're in a bad position as far as debt and spending and things like that? How is the best way to look at that?
Right, right. Now, um, I love this question. Actually, I'm going to go down to this next slide here, and it actually gives debt as a percentage of our GDP. One thing that this debt picture up here in purple, this exponential graph is not showing is the rate at which the U.S. economy is growing over time, and the growth of the U.S. economy, just how productive we can be, is a deflationary effect. It's basically like the supply and demand, right? If you have more money in an economy and everything else remains the same, then we expect prices to rise. We expect that inflationary pressure to happen. So, for example, let's imagine our economy is just us three, right? And we all have $100 to spend, and we each do different things, right? Like let's say I fish and Jordan makes clothes and Josh makes housing, right? So I can go get 10 fish and sell my fish to you guys and eat some myself, right? And you can use those $100 to help buy the fish or buy the clothing, right? Buy what's available in the economy. If we somehow doubled the money that everybody has, let's say now we have $200, well, the actual physical money doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that I can now fish more than I could before, right? It's just like a worthless thing. And it would just mean that prices would basically double. So a fish, let's say, costs $5 in our little economy. Well, if we double everybody's incomes by just printing money, then that would just make fish $10. And we're not better off at all, right? We're just spending more on fish. And if that money is distributed equally to us, then we honestly shouldn't care, right? The money supply has doubled, but our welfare has stayed the same, right?
Got it.
What makes us better off is if there's some amazing technology or just some advancement that allows us to get more output in the same amount of time. So let's say I spend, all day fishing 10 fish, but now I developed a net that allows me to catch fish at double the rate. I get 20 fish now. Well, that's made our society wealthier just because now the price of fish can go down and we all have more fish available to us, right? So if we had the same $100, then maybe fish are now $2.50 instead of $5. And that allows everybody to enjoy more. And so that's what our economy is doing over time. It's just growing. And so when we have an increase in the money supply, the inflationary pressure gets blunted by the increase in production. Like so the increase in possible demand from having more money is offset by the increase in supply that the economy can produce, right? So it almost like kind of keeps prices in check in some way. Um, and so another way to look at our debt over time is to basically look at debt as a percentage of our GDP. So back right around where we had data, 1948, our debt to GDP ratio was 96%. So what that means is if we had, let's say, $10 trillion in GDP, then our debt would also be roughly $10 trillion because our debt is about 100% of our GDP, right? If you put that in like a household's terms, so let's say Josh makes $100,000 as a household per year, right? If Josh has a debt to GDP ratio of 100%, then the debt that Josh would have in his household would also be $100,000, right? So that's what
You could pay it off in a year.
right. He could pay it off in a year if he doesn't have any other expenses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly right. And so that's what this debt to GDP ratio is showing. And it was pretty high right in the 1948 range because if, as you guys know, right,
Post-war.
1940, right, in the 1940s, we were funding a massive war and we were coming off of a Great Depression the decade earlier that was cutting our ability to produce, ability to tax. So we just had a huge debt burden, even though if we scroll up this 1948 picture, the actual dollar amount adjusted for inflation, or no, I don't think this is, this is inflation adjusted in $2025. So this is adjusted for inflation, right? It was about $3.39 trillion in 2025 dollars. Like, so it appears to be $3.39 or $3.39 trillion to us today, right? Roughly. So it looks small, but it was a pretty big burden on people back then because it was such a large percentage. And as our economy grew, the debt to GDP ratio fell pretty dramatically. So if we look up to here, the actual dollar amount of the debt remained constant for a while. It was kind of this fiscal responsibility idea, right, that we're trying to get back to a little bit. And so the GDP was increasing during that time. So the debt ratio was dropping. So it was kind of like if Josh's household was still $100,000 in debt, but Josh's income goes from 100,000 to 120,000 to 200,000 to 300,000, right? So it suddenly becomes a smaller percentage of your overall income, right? And so it's basically like, how easy would it be for the US government to, or for the US economy basically, to pay off the federal government debt
Hmm.
um,
Right.
time. And so what's scary is we're up here in the 125% range, right? And it's growing faster than our income. And so this is just continuing to rise over time. Um, all right. Okay. So any thoughts so far about the debt picture? I wanted to get into some of the revenues and the spending. If you guys want to go there.
My thoughts
I'm
are
curious
freaked
about
out.
the. Oh, go ahead.
It's pretty scary, right?
Yeah, this is horrible. Like,
Yeah.
who's leading this country, man? It's like, did we vote them in or no? It's like, how did this happen? Yeah, it's like,
Right. It is an interesting question. Like, how does it happen?
because real quick, because that graph right there, it's like, yeah, the purple one, it's like, it's an extreme mountain it's climbing. Like a 5-year-old would look at
Mhm.
that and could understand, like, whoa, there's a big difference there. Like, it's not this. It's like, I wish that was a stock, that, that I had, since yeah,
Way, yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
we would all be pretty decent.
I mean, my mind goes straight to the inflection points. And when you look at where this raw debt starts to take off, looks around like the early '80s,
Right.
and then it looks right around maybe the GFC, as well as maybe another inflection point, 2008, right? I mean, we definitely started pumping money into the economy, the GFC, and then when you go to the percentage of GDP, if you scroll down there,
Yeah.
you see that same inflection point in the '80s, and around 2000 as well, probably with maybe 2001, but then definitely 2009, right?
Right.
Or 2008, 2009. So yeah, definitely some events that we recall. You probably have a little bit better of a read on this, but '80s was definitely when we went off the gold standard, right? So would you say that had some sort of impact into how this all played out?
In the 80s, yeah, I think that could be
It's actually a little earlier,
right.
but yeah.
The going off the gold standard kind of faded through the decades, and then the 90s,
Mm,
and kind of officially, in that 80s time period. The 80s were a tricky time for the US. We had the Vietnam War, which was
yeah,
expensive. Anytime, like, you can almost like pinpoint where are the wars in in our economy, and anytime this thing goes up, it's likely that that was part of the reason. And
yeah.
so we have the Vietnam War. We also have rapid inflation during this time, in the 1970s, 1980s, and the Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates pretty aggressively to combat that inflation, that inflationary pressure. And so this was sort of the stagflationary period, which was a slowdown in the US economy while prices were rising. So it was just like, imagine your income goes down and costs are going up at the same time, right? That's what was happening
Hmm.
in the federal government. And it's like, oh, we're spending on this war. Oh, we're changing tax, like corporate tax policy, and lowering and so we're changing some of these various policies to make it a little bit less income coming in, but also the macroeconomy picture is that the economy is not bringing in as much money as it was because the economy is slowing. So this was all part of that 1980s time period.
Mm-hmm.
But then, right, in 2001, we all know what kind of happened there, that little recessionary period with the September 11th, right? We fell into a little recessionary period. Debt to GDP ratio goes up a little bit, continues to climb, and then right, the Great Recession, our incomes go down, or the country's GDP drops. So basically, like our income goes down as a country, which means the federal government's income goes down because it's taxing a smaller income base.
Mm.
Yep.
Um, and so this increase in the during the 2009 time period was in part that, but mostly because of the spending package, the fiscal stimulus, that it was about close to $1 trillion of government spending. It was like $800 billion, which was unheard of at that time.
Mm.
That just shot the debt to GDP ratio up dramatically. And then we all know what happened in 2019, 2020, right? Where we closed down the economy and gave everybody, like, I don't know, it felt like $7,000 each or something, so something crazy. And
And then the businesses got bigger checks too, right?
it was amazing how much money was being spent. Amazing in the sense of the government was really paying a lot.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I just looked it up. It says we officially went off the gold standard in 71.
Right.
That's the short answer. There was like, I guess, kind of increments where they didn't. But it is interesting. I would like to know how much that affects the mindset of the feds, the Federal Reserve, and Congress. Like, what were the old politicians doing to, the Reagan years, before and after? I'm really curious. And then I also, it's interesting it's kind of, the graph gets a little crazy around 2000, right? It drops down. I looked up the last time we had a surplus we had a surplus in 98 to 2001.
That's right.
So I've only been an adult since 2000. So my first year, for 1 year, we had a surplus. That's it, guys. You're done. No more. So it's interesting how, there's that little dip and then it shoots up,
Right.
And my other thought real quick, sorry, just to throw in here, is that I don't even want to figure it out, but how many Democrats were in the executive branch? How many Republicans were in the executive branch? It's a mix. I can't really figure out if there's one better than the other. I feel like it's, at least in my adult lifetime, they all suck.
Right.
Sorry if that makes anyone mad, right? But there's been Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and then Trump again, right? So there's only been 4 presidents, right? Back and forth. And
Right.
it's just doing this with regardless of whoever it is, So the executive branch, on one hand, is at least underneath them. I'm not saying the president himself is going over and like, hey, let's go destroy America. I'm not saying that exactly, but underneath them, it's happening. And I don't know how, I don't have a chart in front of me. How many people from, on the left and right were in Congress at the time? I have no idea, but we could say about 50%, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying let's go destroy America, guys, but underneath their leadership, they're destroying America. And to me, I'm sorry if that sounds like a little crazy to say destroy America. I just know that so we're 40 trillion in debt. And you guys may have heard me say this before, but if I borrow your credit card, right? And to the average American, if somebody else spends your money and I spend $40,000 on your credit card, the average American, they're screwed. Like, you destroyed their life. Now, if you're a lawyer, doctor, add an extra zero to that. Maybe you have 40,000 is nothing to you, right? But the average American, that's a lot, And that's the way I view this. It's like somebody else, I'm not spending that much money. Like, this isn't me. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't take responsibility for this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a powerful analogy for sure. The idea that I think it brings being able to picture the U.S. government debt at the household level, it really is bit in that magnitude, right? If let's say average incomes are about $50,000, $60,000 per household, right, in the United States right now, then it's as if we have a debt, like mostly credit card debt, of $70,000, right? And so if your income's 63, right, and your debt to GDP ratio is 126%, it means your debt is greater than your annual income by a good amount. And it gets scary to think of it in those terms. Now, there are some justifications to why the federal government might want to take on some debt. And I can just throw them out there, and we can talk about them. Some of the justifications, like from an economic theory standpoint, one of them is basically that a lot of the infrastructure that the government lays today. So let's just imagine roads as an example of government infrastructure. Um, that infrastructure doesn't just benefit the current generation, it benefits the current generation as well as future generations, right?
Mhm.
Theory is, why would we saddle just the current generation with paying off the credit of that credit card, or paying off the debt of that credit card, excuse me. So it's like, imagine our grandfathers having to pay for all the roads,
Mhm. And then it's just free.
ex-
Yeah.
kind of free.
Mhm.
So it'd be
So you spread that out over time.
exactly. And so that's one justification for why the federal government might use debt to actually increase the welfare of society and actually increase the productivity of society, and our standard of living. It's almost like using your credit card today, but to buy something that would be an asset. Like putting a credit card, like imagine you're starting a business and you're putting on your credit card, um, a a machine that helps you like make snow cones, and you're a snow cone business, right? And before you were just doing it by hand, but that snow cone machine is really helping you increase your productivity, and you're able to actually make the returns into the future, and so it helps you get more income today to have put that on your credit card, even though it looks
Mm.
the irresponsible
So
way is to just like have a party and like put on your credit card, like, oh, here's a bachelor party, let me put it all on my credit card, right? And that doesn't lead to more income.
It'd be more fun.
Right, it would be.
so going back to the tracker that we were looking at earlier, I think it said something like 300,000 per taxpayer. What it was, 116K per citizen. So you could say, I mean, depending on which way you frame it, that each citizen is inheriting 116,000 worth of benefit, supposed benefit. Right? If you're talking about the ice cream cone, being paid off over multiple years, or in another way that it's 36,000 per taxpayer, right? And then I guess your question would then be, okay, well, what's the benefit? How do we conceptualize this? Because going to the U.S. debt clock, we are seeing 116K of debt per citizen, 360K per taxpayer. And if you're saying that this is just an accumulated benefit of things that are being passed from generation to generation and kind of smoothed out over time, how do we conceptualize 116K that I as a citizen, or 360K as I as a taxpayer am inheriting from Americans having spent money and built up value, like infrastructure, like whatever, however you want to conceptualize it. What is it that I'm inheriting in that way?
Right. Now, this is one component of why we can justify some of the, now I'm saying some of the federal government debt. Now, not all of the federal government debt is necessarily that wonderful investment into the future, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I love how you frame that. You think it's 116,000 debt per citizen, is like a 116,000 benefit. We have a lot of things that we spend on that we would all probably consider very wasteful. Um, and so thinking about how to frame that. I mean, just thinking about any kind of war.
War. I was just going to say war.
Is necessary, right? Maybe, but yeah, exactly. The amount of money we spend on war, some may consider to be an investment, right? It's keeping the peace, or what you know, the U.S. is uh, showing its power and dominance, or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
I mean, but when we think about the logic of war, the technical function of it, it's really just building stuff so we can destroy stuff. And
Yeah.
that is in from a standard of living perspective, a pretty big waste, right?
Hmm.
So if you're building a missile, all of those resources could have been used to build, I don't know, microchips or computers or TVs or anything that would increase our standard of living in a way that would be beneficial, maybe, or fun, right? Take that missile and drop it on buildings in other countries, and now they have destroyed infrastructure. We can, we can't trade with them as much if we're just from a US economy centric view, right? They are less able to be productive for the global economy, which makes us all collectively worse off.
Well,
Yeah.
ironically, yeah, that's good. You don't have to convince me of any of that. Ironically, though, we don't have to stay on this topic too long, but we drop bombs in certain countries and then we send guys over to go rebuild what we just destroyed. And from my understanding, there's been several dams that we've destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not sold on it. But isn't a lot of the debt, like, yeah, I'm with you there on the whole war thing, but a lot of it's going to social services, right? A lot of what we're spending, right? It's going towards like social security.
Uh,
Mhm.
I'll make one comment before we get to the social services. I'll
Yeah,
make
yeah.
one comment, and you're gonna hate this. You're gonna hate this, and I'm gonna say it anyway. And this is not Jordan's a war hawk, but this is trying to steel man it in the most compassionate way
Great, great.
possible. All right, so I'm gonna do it, even though it pains me to do it. I'm gonna do it. You could say that that the wars keep foreign invaders off our soil, which we haven't had since Pearl Harbor, right? The wars have won trade routes like what we have through Panama Canal, right? That have kept helped lower cost of goods to Americans and help us to bring products and services that have improved our quality of living here domestically. Those are only two examples.
No,
This is
those
me taking a swing at it. I don't want to say war is good, but there's always a perspective to steel man somebody's
absolutely.
decisions, and I think it's important to say that because you can disagree with war. I don't like war myself, but it's I don't think it's fair to just uh, to point at the negatives without evaluating trade-offs.
No, I actually, Jordan, that's really good. I can be very harsh on certain think tanks in the United States who I would not. Yeah, I'd be very upset if I was left in a room alone with them. But yeah, I think that's really good. It's like, you know, I've said this many times. Like, we won the lottery by living in America in 2026, and yes, like I accept your steel man. It's a really good one. I'm not. That's another conversation, but like
To the tune of 116K, Josh?
what's it?
Right. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, what Josh was getting at there was really like, what are we actually spending on, right? How big of a piece of this spending pie is uh, defense spending, right? And
Hmm.
let's just quickly look at that because it is pretty interesting by category. This is again the Treasury.gov website. The biggest pieces of the pie are what are called mandatory spending,
Okay.
like Social Security, Medicare, um, income security is also in there. Stuff like unemployment insurance and right, other kinds of social safety net types of programs. Um, and the piece of national defense is relatively small in there.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Right.
Wow.
And what's really scary is that the amount of discretionary spending, which is the spending that the federal government can choose each year, is approximately about one third or less. It's like a shrinking percentage of the pie.
Mm.
Everything else is mandatory spending. So it's like 67. Imagine your household, right? Let's say you have $100,000, and at the start of the year, you have $70,000 of that automatically being spent on stuff that is required for you to spend. Like, let's say your housing and your schooling and some just things that you have no control over. It's like that's money just going out the window. The stuff that you can control is like this $30,000 amount over,
Wow.
right? And that's what's really scary. And then every
Mm.
year that piece gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like 71,000 next year and then 72,000, right?
Wow.
And so that's what what's one of the scary pieces of this debt picture is that it's spiraling out of control of Congress, right? Unless
Yeah.
reform Social Security, reform Medicare, right? Do some of these large changes, the debt picture is looking more and more bleak as we move forward. One
Mm.
thing that's pretty interesting as well is this piece of net interest. This is 15% of our income for the federal government's income goes toward paying just the interest on the debt.
See, that's crazy to me. Now you're like,
Right. You haven't even you 15% of your income. So let's say you're $100,000, $15,000 is gone just paying your credit card debt. Not even you're just the interest on it. Not even the balance on it. Right. So we paid nothing down on that interest. Right. All right. So
so,
excuse me. We paid nothing down on the balance, just the interest.
well, so, okay, I'm a simple guy. So when I think of it like this, I'm just trying to imagine my wife and myself sitting down. And if you were to just replace this with like, living expense, kids' clothes, car, et cetera, right? And if you had that right there and she goes, "Oh, yeah, you didn't know 15% of it just goes towards interest." It's like, wow, I'm really working just for interest like that. I'd be so depressed, that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels really bad. Now when we put the whole piece together, like the interest comes out in the form of people who own government debt. And so this is one term that many use uh, to denote government debt is just government bonds. So I'm sure you've heard of like, oh, the bond rate or bonds, right? So you and I can just go to the Treasury, direct.gov or whatever website and buy government bonds now, and some of this piece of interest will be paid to us, like whoever owns those bonds. So it's not like this net interest is necessarily like getting lost to the ether, right? It's going back into the holders of, right, government debt, right? Some of the holders of government debt are U.S. citizens, and U.S. people who live in the United States, and some are foreign, but it's still a major drag on that federal debt piece. So if we wanted to get this under control, this piece of the pie is a growing piece. I think maybe 7 to 10 years ago, this was like at 8%, right? So it's like basically doubled in a decade.
That's crazy.
Vintage, right? It's getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Um, so right, and what's especially scary? Let me see if I have it on this. Um, no, it's not on this one. I think it might be on this one. What's especially scary right now is that the interest rate that the federal government has to give on the bond on the new debt that they issue has been going up. And so the average interest rate has been going up as well over the last few years,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And what that means is basically the same amount of debt. Let's imagine we have $70,000 of debt. Before we were paying, 2.5% interest on it, let's say, but now we're paying 3.6, right? That change in interest rate is a massive change in the amount that we have to spend. And as long as we have uh, relatively high inflation, the Federal Reserve has no real ability to lower the interest rate, and that any new debt just is issued at a higher and higher interest rate, right? And another kind of scary piece is that the more debt the U.S. government issues, the less people have confidence that the U.S. government will be able to pay that back
Hmm.
slowly, right? It's the slow drip of leaking confidence in the U.S. government, and so that decrease in confidence over time also forces the U.S. government to have to issue a higher interest rate, so people will be compensated by that added risk that they perceive the U.S. government to be, right? So it's like you would if you were guaranteed $100 tomorrow if you invested in $1,000 into one thing, then that would be a sure bet. You're getting a 10% return tomorrow, right? But if the chance that you get that $100 return is only 90%, well, you're a bit less likely to want to do that, right? It's a little bit more risky of a bet. It's like a kind of more like a casino, right? Gambling. So the more debt that the US government takes on, the more it looks like the odds are against you. Like in a casino, if you buy their debt, you're like, oh, maybe they're going to default and the debt that I own is actually going to be worthless, right? And so that commands a higher interest rate that they're going to have to pay. So this puts upward pressure on that interest rate piece, um, which continues to be a drag over here on the net interest side of the U.S. economy, or excuse me, the net interest side of the federal government debt. So it's
Wow.
it's like this, yeah, this kind of loop that we're finding ourselves in this downward spiral, and if we don't do something soon, it feels like it's going to get out of control. And kind of one last thing before I kind of yield this point is that the bond rates, right, the yield, when that goes up, it siphons money away from stock market
Hmm.
toward the bond market, and that sends the stock market down. And that if that happens quickly or prolonged enough, then that could send us into a recession or a depression, and that would be the worst outcome, right? So that is the major fear that we're running into from a purely financial standpoint. That I mean, you have people's retirements wiped out, right?
Right.
Any given recession or any given stock market crash. We're so invested in that. So this piece of, oh, the bond rates are going up, people are attracted to putting money in there, and that sends stocks down, right? Um, that spiral can be devastating if it takes hold. Right?
So, Lewis, yeah, this is all scary. And just something I looked up today, and this is something I think about is like, why can't the federal government, I don't know, why can't they back it? Because how many people have we heard in our lifetime where like, I'm going to DC to balance the books. You know what I mean? They always have some schmeal like that. And then no, it doesn't seem like anyone's really doing much. I do know Thomas Matthew walks around with the debt clock. I think he made it himself. He went to MIT. Very smart guy. He made a debt clock. So it's connected with the official amount. And I don't know where that is, if it goes to like the Fed, whatever it is. So he walks around with it, just spinning nonstop. But something I looked up, and it says here that 49 out of the 50 states require a balanced budget.
Mm.
45 require that the governor is to submit a balanced budget. 44 require the legislatives to pass a balanced budget, and 41 require the governor to sign a balanced budget. And it's now what I did a little reading, not a lot on it. It's like there still is a big difference from like Utah, North Dakota, or South Dakota. I guess South Dakota does a good job. and Utah does compared to California. But California, who loves spending money, we all know this. It's like every time we go to vote, it's like, spend more. It's all about spending more money, a lot of the time. But it's like there's a big gap between those states, but there's still like a rule that they have to have a balanced budget. And it's like, well, what can be done at the federal level?
Right.
Right.
One challenge about that balanced budget piece is so we were talking a little bit about why the federal government can get into debt and have it be justified a little bit because the federal government is building out some infrastructure that benefits all states, benefits maybe most, or hopefully the whole country. The federal government is maybe funding innovation through research and development and all kinds of things. One of the big pieces of what the federal government can do with fiscal policy is basically during times of recession, during times when the U.S. economy is headed down, is that they can stimulate the economy by basically spending packages, right? We saw that in
Right.
right? We saw that during COVID, where the federal government steps in and tries to bolster the economy, and obviously it doesn't come without cost, right? We saw the inflationary effect of some of that with where the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates very low, issuing a lot of new debt, and the federal government, putting a lot of stimulus into the economy. If we force the federal government to balance the budget yearly, it basically it cuts out one of the policy levers that we have in dealing with recession. And so that's one of the biggest critiques, because a recession is like the worst of all outcomes, right? A recession will make it even harder for the federal government uh, to to meet its obligations, because during a recession, people's incomes go down, so the tax revenue goes down. And if we have if we're forced to balance budgets, that would mean that the federal government would also have to cut some of their jobs and some of their spending, which would further fuel the negative cycle of a recessionary economy. And so the popular theory is if we were to vote for something like that, we could do something more along the lines of a cyclical balanced budget, where during a business cycle of like 11 years ish, where we have strong economic growth, we should have surpluses. And that surplus builds up such that we can spend during a recessionary time period.
Do you mean that in terms of like nominal amounts? So we're at 40 trillion today, and you say, okay, we need to have some sort of cycle. Maybe that means that in 10 years from now, we're required to get back down to 40 trillion. Is that how that would work? Okay, and 40 trillion would be a number that would be fixed as like a real number, as opposed to we're at 120% of debt to GDP. We can go up to 150 as long as we get down to 120% of debt to GDP, right?
Yeah, you can actually do it.
Because then the numbers can get kind of crazy that way. But when you're talking about fixing it in terms of real debt that's outstanding over a period of time.
Is that way, the way that you just explained, Jordan, is just fix it at 40 trillion or whatever we're currently at, so that we stop the bleeding, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe we can start to pay down if we wanted. But even just plateauing the debt at this point could be an incredible improvement, obviously, versus having it exponentially increase.
Yeah. So I've been
very clear, and very clear for policymakers.
See, and I've kind of been fascinated by this thought for a while, because I see the debt going up, and I'm like you said, I just did this little steel man about the going to war and how that might benefit us, right? And I love thinking about it from the other side, and I've always thought, there is some level of healthy debt. There has to be, right? And you've explained that to us, over the last little while that we've been talking. And so if there is a level of healthy debt for America, then that number can't be fixed, because in theory, our ability to produce, to harvest fish, to make clothes, or the example that you gave earlier, is going to continue to grow because we are going to innovate, and that's one thing that we've proven over time. We're going to continue to innovate, especially right now. We're on the advent of AI, and things are getting already costs are dropping, right? And that's a pretty exciting time that we're in right now, and it's gonna accelerate. So our ability to produce is going to increase, and the level of debt should be able to be a product of that. So that's kind of where I kind of run up against some of these balanced budget ideas, where I do agree that there needs to be fiscal restraints on Congress. Absolutely. I don't like to see these charts, especially with the debt to GDP running out of control. That scares me. But I also worry about if we go in, if we tell Congress, we force Congress to cap it, or to restrict their ability to raise debt when it's a healthy thing and a needful thing and beneficial to Americans to raise debt, right? That's the thing that I've always wrestled with.
Mm-hmm. I
And
love
Jordan,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Jordan, I would say that's awesome, and that's what you're really good at, like thinking these things through, think of the other side. My side, I'm more negative than you, Jordan.
I love it.
My side, that I agree. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said at all. I you're just maybe more optimistic than me, but how come I've been an adult since what, 2000? It's like I hear people talk a good talk, but don't walk a good walk. And it's
Mm.
like, how many congressmen, how many senators, how many presidents, talk a good talk, and all we're seeing in my adult lifetime is massive debt, not more debt. We're not. It's not. I remember being in school during the first Bush and Clinton, and people complaining about the debt. As a kid, people were complaining about the debt. That is pennies compared to what we're at now. So, like this, I'm with you, but I definitely, I'll say this, and with a little plug. This is why I definitely agree with Convention of States, COS,
Mm.
is that
Yeah.
something needs to be done. I don't have the answers. Like, you guys are way smarter than me. But I don't think people in Washington are way smarter than me. Sorry. But like I do think we need something that's going to slap them across the head, and something needs to be done. I like what you said, Jordan. You said, like, if we, there could be some of these changes could be too quick, too fast, whatever. I'm with you there. But like, this is what I'm going to state this. Okay. I think there should be a new constitutional amendment, and it should be, and this is just I'm generalizing. Fiscal responsibility for the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits for the bureaucrats, not just senator, congressman. That's what I think. The
Yeah.
rest of the stuff, I'm going to let you figure this out, Louis and Jordan. You guys can do all the details. Okay. But that's what I think.
Yeah.
I think we definitely need a new constitutional amendment, and that's what COS
Yep.
does.
Well,
Because I'm
we
freaked out
happen to
by
be
this.
we happen to be in the amendment lab, so
That's
we
right.
we can do some experiments here, and one experiment that I think would be interesting to noodle over is how the debt raises, right? And a lot of it gets done through bills in Congress that are voted by 50% of Congress, which is quite easy to do when a house is controlled by one or the other party, and then the president obviously is able to sign off on that. That changes when you require more consensus. If we were to do an amendment that required Congress to garner more consensus, maybe it's a 2/3, maybe it's a 3/4, that would be insane for 3/4 of Congress to agree on anything debt related, that it would be that hurdle to be able to increase the debt ceiling as opposed to just 51%. Anyway, this is this is some I would love to hear get debated at a convention of states.
Yeah.
Let people talk about it and see how much consensus would be required. And I think what that does is allows a robust debate and people who are smarter than we are to make the right decisions,
Yeah.
right? And to garner enough support behind that to win a supermajority in a political body that is super, super contentious. And if you can do that, then I think it's the right thing to increase the debt. Otherwise, probably shouldn't until you can do that.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a great start to a solution. Really, kind of with what Josh was saying. Fiscal responsibility sounds amazing, though we should go with something that's pretty specific to be like, hey, this is exactly roughly what we were looking for, just so that we know, like, this is what I want to hold my elected leaders, elected officials accountable for, right? If they're not voting for things along these lines, then they're out of line with what I'm voting for and what I care about, and some of the dangers I see looming in the next few years or a decade, right? So,
Mhm.
um, it's a great time to think about how reforms at at that level can hopefully change the trajectory that we're currently on.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I just kind of wrapping up. I think um, I agree with everything you guys said. I just have one last question for you, Lewis. What what real quickly on this topic? What misconception uh, do you find that the general public, and actually I want to ask about your students.
Mm.
Jordan works with students, so I'm real curious. Like, what are the students when they first get to you? I don't know if they're a freshman, sophomore, whatever they are. They first take an economics class. What's their thoughts when they either first get into this or when you're first presenting this to them? Are like people shocked by this? Are people understanding this? Like, do people think, nope, I voted for the guy who's going to fix it, or the other side's like, I voted for the guy who fixed it. Like, what are you saying?
Right. In So the basic macro class, when I present the numbers, they're pretty shocking. Right. So it was like $37 trillion, and like, wow. I have students guess like, what's the debt roughly, and people are in the billions. Like they're off by orders of magnitude, right? And just
Real quick, can you pull the debt clock up as you
right.
finish
It's
up too?
it's it's grown, and if I could have had all the dollars that it's grown in just the hour that we've been talking, um, I'd be a pretty wealthy man. um, Students generally look at this and they go one of two ways. They get passionate about this topic and they're like, "This is a problem. We need to fix it." But we don't talk too much, sadly, about the interplay between the policymakers and the political side of this. It's like my job as an economist explaining macroeconomics is like, here's the understanding of the debt, right? Period. And where I'm not saying, oh, go, vote for certain elected leaders or anything like that. Like, we don't really get into that. Um, and so some of them get passionate about that and want to go off in that direction, or like searching for solutions, right? And I propose simple things like, oh, we need to reform our mandatory spending piece of the pie, in a big way to get this under control. Um, right. And others are just, they get the information, they're shocked maybe, but then it doesn't go very very far, right? It's just, okay, well, it seems like a problem somebody else can handle, right? So it's one of the two. Um, but I would say this piece is the most palatable and maybe the most infuriating, that students find in a macroeconomics class, because when you relate it to like a household and spending in that context, it's like, why am I'm not allowed to have debt, but the government can. They just keep borrowing, and that's okay. And right, it gets to be a bit of a contentious, issue.
Yeah. And my takeaway from this, close to hour is, um, it my takeaway is really my perception even before. It's that regardless of who's president, we're still going in debt. I
Right.
just, this is my opinion. Like I said, maybe I'm more negative than Jordan, um, and that's fine. But I just don't see the left or the right saving us from this. I feel like there needs to be, I'm not saying people from the left or right can do good. I'm not saying that. I'm not going that far. I'm just saying in general, like we need something. And also, I tried doing the math. So I think while we've been on, I think the debt has grown around 200 million since we've been on. I was trying, and I wrote it down late, by the way. So that's why I asked you to pull this back up. But yep. Yeah. So, and also just kind of wrapping up, if anyone out there, wants to get a hold of me, I'm on the leadership team for Convention of States, California. My email address is Joshua.Castro at cosaction.com. If you agree with those three things that I brought up for a new constitutional amendment, that is what Convention of States is working on. We're trying to get a new amendment as fiscal responsibility for the federal government, limit the power of jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits for federal bureaucrats. Go to conventionofstates.com. You can sign the petition. It goes to your local assemblyman. And Jordan, you got anything to close out?
Yeah, one other plug. We've also started a Substack writing some constitutional reform concepts, things that would be worthy of 38 states ratifying them and could improve the country. It's called the Amendment Lab as well. So just search it on Substack, the Amendment Lab, and let us know your thoughts on some of the concepts that are going there. If there's anyone out there who are interested in proposing amendment concepts, we're also taking guest authors to publish there.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll be going over those right here in the future. Louis, thanks a lot, buddy. We really appreciate your time. I know you have a child to get to. Say goodnight if he's still up. If not, sorry, we stole you from him. But yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm sorry, Michael Phelps is the face of swimming, and it's not you. But
Could have
actually,
been you,
maybe I'm
man.
not,
Look at that
because you
smile.
wouldn't be here, with us. So that's right. We'll do it again. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.